Europe aims to rely less on U.S. defense after Trump's Greenland push. War with Iran would be an unforgettable lesson for Trump. Rubio visits Central Europe to bolster ties with pro-Trump leaders. Iran says potential energy, mining and aircraft deals on table in talks with U.S. European leaders say the continent is entering a new security era, with European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen warning that some lines have been crossed that cannot be uncrossed. Speaking at the Munich Security Conference, officials highlighted growing uncertainty over the strength of transatlantic ties following President Donald Trump's return to the White House and his controversial proposal to annex Greenland. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio attempted to reassure allies, saying Washington wants to work with Europe. However, his speech avoided key topics such as NATO, Russia, and the war in Ukraine, deepening concerns about America's long-term commitment to European defense. With Russia viewed as an increasing threat and the war in Ukraine approaching its fifth year, European leaders pledged to accelerate military spending and reduce reliance on the United States. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, French President Emmanuel Macron, and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer all backed the creation of a stronger European pillar within NATO. Merz also revealed early discussions with France on a potential European nuclear deterrent, a notable move given that France currently holds the continent's only fully independent nuclear arsenal. Defense budgets across Europe are rising rapidly. NATO members have agreed to increase core military spending to 3.5% of GDP, while overall European defense spending has climbed nearly 80% since before the Ukraine war. Iran's Armed Forces Chief of Staff, Major General Sayed Abdolrahim Musavi, has issued a warning to the United States following recent comments by President Donald Trump about possible military action against Iran. Speaking at a ceremony on Sunday, Musavi urged Trump to think twice before considering any attack, criticizing what he described as derogatory remarks toward Iran. He questioned Washington's intentions, asking why the United States speaks of negotiation while simultaneously raising the prospect of war. The Iranian commander also cautioned that any military conflict would prompt a strong response, warning that Iran would deliver a lesson the U.S. president would not forget. The remarks reflect rising tensions between Tehran and Washington, amid ongoing disputes over security and diplomacy. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has pledged to strengthen cooperation with Central Europe as he begins an official visit to Slovakia and Hungary, two nations whose conservative governments maintain close ties with President Donald Trump. During meetings in Slovakia with Prime Minister Robert Fico and President Peter Pellegrini, Rubio focused on energy security and defense cooperation. The visit marks the first trip by a U.S. Secretary of State to the country in 7 years. Rubio said the Trump administration intends to make Central Europe a key partner in its global strategy, promising concrete actions that would benefit both American and regional interests. His visit comes as Slovakia and Hungary maintain complex relationships with the broader European Union while continuing to rely heavily on Russian oil and gas. A day earlier at the Munich Security Conference, Rubio combined a message of unity with continued criticism of Europe following a difficult year in transatlantic relations. President Trump's tariffs on EU nations and his proposal to acquire Greenland have pushed some Western European leaders to consider a more independent path. Rubio emphasized that nations are expected to act in their own interests, but noted that when those interests align, they create strong opportunities for partnership and cooperation. Iran says it is seeking a nuclear agreement with the United States that delivers economic benefits for both sides, just days before a new round of talks between Tehran and Washington. An Iranian diplomat stated that long-term stability of any deal would require the U.S. to gain financially as well, pointing to potential cooperation in oil, gas, mining, and aircraft purchases. The renewed negotiations aim to resolve decades of tensions over Iran's nuclear program and prevent a possible military confrontation. The United States has already deployed additional military assets to the region, while emphasizing that diplomacy remains its preferred path. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said President Donald Trump favors a negotiated settlement, but acknowledged that success is not guaranteed. A U.S. delegation is expected to meet Iranian officials in Geneva, with Oman serving as mediator. Iran's foreign minister has also traveled there for discussions with international officials, including the head of the UN nuclear watchdog. Iranian leaders have signaled openness to compromise, including potentially reducing highly enriched uranium in exchange for sanctions relief. However, Tehran maintains it will not accept a complete halt to uranium enrichment, a major sticking point for Washington. Tensions remain high. Iran has warned it could target U.S. bases in the Middle East if attacked, while the U.S. continues to increase economic pressure. Reports indicate Washington is working to curb Iran's oil exports to China, which account for the vast majority of Tehran's oil revenue.